Those of you who may have been paying careful attention this Advent season may notice something different about our sanctuary. What is it, Laura? We don't have the laptop, that's true. We don't, because we have little R2-D2 sitting on the ledge there. Yes, our new tech system. But something else, maybe for those of you with a particular aesthetic sensibility. I'm thinking, what's that? Well, the wires are gone, that's true. Yes, I heard it. Brett got it. Yes. For those of you who like colors, you may notice that today St. Paul's is decked out in blue rather than the usual purple. Yes. And so that is because blue is an alternative color choice for the season of Advent. It's sort of understood to be a little less penitential and sort of more preparatory. But I like blue for this Sunday because I call this Virgin Mary blue, because the Virgin Mary is so often depicted in this color. But I think it could also be called St. Joseph blue, because on this Sunday in Advent, we hear the story of Mary and Joseph. And so this Sunday in Advent is all about that first coming of Christ. We talked in the past few weeks about how Advent means coming, and coming in various ways, past, present, future. So now this is a flashback to 2,000 years ago in Roman-occupied Holy Land and the context of Jesus' birth. And so Mary and Joseph were far from the contemporary power couple. If anything, they were the powerless couple. Mary is often thought by biblical scholars to have been a teenage girl, maybe 14. And Joseph may have been many years her senior, maybe he was 2 decades older, and they were engaged to be married. It was probably an arranged marriage, and it was a typical ordinary marriage in a typical ordinary Jewish town in this backwater area of the Roman Empire. And everything seemed to be going as planned until something very wrong seemed to happen. And what was that? It's stated very understatedly and laconically in the first or second sentence of that passage from the Gospel of Matthew. Yeah, Betsy, what is it? She's pregnant. Did you notice that? And before they were living together, she was with child. So this was just absolutely disgraceful and shameful in the context of Near Eastern society 2,000 years ago. And I want you to imagine now that we're watching CNN or some other, cable news program, and we've got sort of a split screen. And so let's go first to the left side, and we see Mary, right? We see Mary. And Mary's story is told in the Gospel of Luke, so a different gospel. But that one's more familiar, and we just sang that hymn which depicts the story from Luke. And so the story is, you know it, Mary's probably in her kitchen, maybe she's unloading the dishwasher, I don't know. And then suddenly, right, the angel Gabriel appears, and what does Gabriel say? Hey, by the way, you're going to bear a son who's going to be the long-awaited Messiah, and this is going to happen by the Holy Spirit. And what does Mary say? Yeah, she says sure. She says yes, but she says sure. Mary says in the beautiful words of that hymn, probably from the King James Bible, "To me be as it pleaseth God." Basically, she says yes. Now, what could Mary have said? Like, yes, if I were Mary, I would have said, God, this is a really bad time. Like Joseph and I, we've got a lot of wedding prep to do. We're planning for the honeymoon. Like, thanks, but no thanks. Or she could have said, yeah, well, right. well, how could this be? And what are you, nuts? God, you know what it's like in a small town like Nazareth. You know all the gossip and the head wagging, right? And I'm going to be disgraced. Joseph is going to be disgraced. My child is going to be disgraced. What are you talking about, God? What are you asking me to do? And she could have said no. But Mary said yes. Now, let's go to the other side of the split screen depicted in the gospel that we heard today from Matthew, and let's look at Joseph. So what happens to Joseph? What does he hear? He hears this news, and he thinks to himself, what? Yeah, she's been with someone else. Who needs this? Fill in the blank, right? I liked my life the way it was. I can go back to that. I'll find some other girl to marry. And so he says, well, you know, I'm a decent guy, and so I'll find a way to do this quietly. You know, because according to strict interpretations of the law, you know what could have happened to Mary? Yeah, she could have been executed for this, right? So he says, you know, I'll just find a way to do this quietly. And then what happens? The angel comes to him in a dream, tells him to marry, and he does it. Now, what could he have said even after the angel comes? Right, forget it, right? It's the same situation. Like, I'm going to be disgraced, Mary's going to be disgraced, my kid is going to be a you-know-what. In Hebrew, it's called a mamzer, which is just as bad as the word in English. It's the child of an illicit union. And when you are a mamzer, you're excluded from the synagogue, and basically you live a life of shame. So even with this knowledge, both Mary and Joseph say yes to God. So Mary and Joseph are symbolic of saying yes to God. That's what this Sunday in Advent is all about, saying yes to God. So here's what my favorite unnamed theologian says about saying yes to God. From the very beginning, faith, hope, and love are planted deep within our nature. Indeed, they are our very nature. But we have to awaken, allow, and advance this core identity by saying a conscious yes to it and drawing upon it as a reliable and absolute source. Our saying yes to such implanted faith, hope, and love plays a crucial role in the divine equation. Human freedom matters. Mary's yes seemed to be essential to the event of incarnation. God does not come uninvited. God and grace cannot enter without an opening from our side, or we would be mere robots. God does not want robots, but lovers who freely choose to love in return for love. And toward that supreme end, God seems quite willing to wait, cajole, and entice. So this season of Advent, I was thinking about, Advent means coming, but I thought, what Advent is really about is longing. And I said this a few weeks ago. Advent is really the time in the church year that makes sacred that longing that we have for new life in our lives, whatever that may be. Whether it's a new relationship, whether it's a new job, whether it's a new chapter in our life, Advent is about longing for that. But there are so many ways to respond to that longing. Most of us, most of the time, probably say, you know what, that's kind of a nice fantasy, and then we just dismiss it, ignore it, or resist it, and go on with the status quo. But as we learned from John the Baptist, preparing for that coming of new life requires turning, it requires changing, it requires transforming. And the key to do that is to say yes. To say, I don't know what that entails. It might be scary, it might be different, it might be uncomfortable, but I am going to say yes. And I think that saying yes happens multiple times. There may be the first yes, but then there's a yes as the situation continues. And there's this story that I heard many years ago. I was in an African American church in Nashville, Tennessee, and it was probably this time in Advent. And it was the story of the unmoved rock. Have any of you heard this story? So anyway, there's a man who is yearning for something in his life. He doesn't know quite what. You know, his life is okay, but he wants something new and different, a sense of purpose, a sense of meaning. He wants God to come and to tell him what his purpose or meaning should be. So one day, God shows up, and God says, I have a task for you. I have a purpose for you. And he takes the man into the yard, and he says, you see this boulder? I want you to push this boulder. And the man looks at the boulder and he says, yeah, you know, like it's kind of in the way, it's in the path, and it blocks the view. So, okay, I get it, God. I'm going to push the boulder. So every day, the man goes out and he pushes against the boulder. Maybe it moves, you know, just a millimeter, but, you know, doesn't roll away. And he does this every single day to no avail. And at first he gets a little disappointed, and then a little frustrated, and then a little angry, and he says, you know, what the heck, God, is going on? But he still keeps doing it. And then one day, even though it's not moving, he finally says, you know what, God? Maybe you want the boulder moved, maybe not. Whatever you want, to me be as it pleaseth God. And then God shows up, and God says, you know, I asked you only to push the boulder, not to move the boulder. Look how strong you have become in this process of pushing the boulder. And now, you know what? I'm going to move the boulder. And God moves the boulder. So Advent is a lot like that. It's a lot like saying yes at the beginning, saying yes as it continues, saying yes until God acts. And so I was thinking about this in my own life, and this has been an Advent of a lot of waiting and preparation for me. And Roy and I have been working very hard the past month or so to put together all sorts of financial reports for the bishop's office, because if this parish would like to have an increased time arrangement for its priest, there needs to be permission from the bishop. So Roy and I put together all of these spreadsheets, all of these documents. This was back in November, and we were waiting and waiting and waiting. And I was sending email missives to various people at ECCT. Hello, hello, Roy and I sent those numbers. Any response yet? And I began to think that dealing with ECCT, the Episcopal Church in Connecticut, was more like dealing with the DMV. And I was getting very frustrated, and I was walking in New York City on 8th Avenue, and I was saying, what the heck? I don't know what's going on. And I finally said, okay, God, whatever it is, to me be as it pleaseth you. And then I said, okay, I'm going to buy some flowers for Christmas. And I went to a local florist on 8th Avenue. I found some holly and mistletoe, and I found a beautiful pink peony. And I took the peony to the apartment, and I hoped that it would open. I put some flower food in it, and indeed it opened. And then I checked my email, and lo and behold, there was a message saying, congratulations. St. Paul's has demonstrated the capacity to retain and sustain an increased time arrangement for its priest. And so I said, okay, God, I get it. You know, it really required saying yes, and saying yes again, and saying yes again. So Advent, today especially, when we celebrate Virgin Mary Blue or St. Joseph Blue, it's all about saying, to me be as it pleaseth God, and then letting God do the rest. In the name of God, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit.